scenario for Swedish agriculture, and the study was finished, was ready in August, and I did a presentation on a seminar in December, and it was based on, I'm an economist, so there will be a lot of prices in this presentation. It was based on OECD outlook for prices, and they were around 100, or a little bit more, dollar per ton wheat. And from August to December, the prices had gone up with 2 or 3 times. So when I did this presentation on this forecast, we were trying to convince the audience that the prices should be 100 when it was 300. So there is a tendency to make a forecast of what you actually observe. And as we heard from last speaker, it's difficult with statistic from history, but it's even more difficult with future statistics existing. So it's not only prices that is a problem when trying to make a scenario, and I'd say scenarios because this is not one scenario. It could be different scenarios. Also, it's very difficult to set technological change, of course, and policy scenarios and other things. So what we did last year was to hire a consultant to do a study with a lot of different scenarios, changing productivity, prices, reforms, and also on different horizons, 2020 and 2050, to identify where the uncertainties were and what different assumptions meant for how the agriculture sector should develop and what the environmental effects could be. This was, I will present only a few. I think we made 11 scenarios, and I will present just a few of them. Not that these scenarios are more true than others, but to just have a discussion on what the mechanism and how different development affects the agriculture sector. This was basically the idea was for looking at the biodiversity in the provision of biodiversity from the agriculture sector in terms of semi-natural permanent pasture and also diversity in the forest districts. But it can, of course, also be used for what is interesting here, phosphorus and nitrogen. But we haven't done the calculation on this, and this study is not published yet, so it's a bit preliminary. But I don't think we have the time to correct any errors. So if you find them, we will try to hide them. So this is the method. Farmers, this is for Sweden. So the Swedish farm sector, the agriculture sector will react on prices, change in technology, and policy. So if there is no changes in prices, if they will continue to be the same, I mean there is no need to change your production decision. And if there is no change in productivity, you have the same way of producing things, there is no need to change. And the same with policy reforms. So if this just goes on, the sector will continue the same way, of course, after first adjusting to the foreign prices before, because there's a lag. So what we need to do is to set a scenario for prices, productivity, and policy. Nice with 3 P's, so you remember that. Prediction. And then the sector will adjust, and we are representing the sector with this model, Swedish agricultural sector model, that is has its pros and cons, so we'll come back to that. And so we plug in this to the model, and we get production, land use, crops, animals, regional impact out of the model. And the good thing about this kind of model is that it's very, it describes the agriculture sector in a quite detailed way. So it's quite transparent. You can see why a different price leads to a different behavior. And you can see how well the technology is described. It's of course roughly anyhow, but you can, it's transparent in that way. It's also transparent in an economic way, that you have equilibrium on all markets. There is no way you can make money by changing your behavior. So it sets the market. One problem, I'm not going to say that this is the best model. There are other models that describe the Swedish sector. Capri is one model, but this was the model that best described actually this pasture problem. One problem is that it's quite sensitive. So if you have a small change here, you will have can have quite a large reaction. So you have to bear that in mind. Okay, so we put in prices and productivity. We also did some policy reform scenarios. I will not present them. We did some on the reform of CAP, some greening, and also some reform. But this, I mean, what we have now is really decoupled support. We have support that is not linked to production. So we will not have much effect in the model, and probably not in real world too, if we do changes in the support. So it has more impact on what you say, the provision of public goods, than on the negative environmental impact. So it's not very interesting in this seminar, because it doesn't happen very much. So what really is important is that prices, world market prices, are very important for what will happen in the Swedish agriculture sector, and of course also productivity. So actually, it's the global consumption that is important. And as you all know, this picture, there will be 9 billion people, and we also have an increased demand for meat and for biofuel, for using agriculture products, or at least agriculture land for other than food production. So with increased demand and more people and more per capita, does that mean that prices will go up? Not necessarily. This is historical prices. What we can see is, this is real prices. So what we can see is that, I mean, this is nothing new. This has been going on for, maybe except for biofuels, this has been going on for decades. This is increased demand, and supply, productivity has kept up with the increased demand. So supply increases at a faster rate than demand, means prices are going down in real terms. So the question is, will this continue? Will productivity growth be higher than the increase in demand?
Excuse me, can you explain what you show here on this figure?
Oh, good. This is rice, and we have wheat and maize down here.
And the axis is up to 2,100, or?
This is 57 to 2007. This is the price. This is the last price peak we saw in 2007. So it's, I don't know if it's, we have 2010 here. Yes, it's not easy to see. Sorry about that. Can't even see the reference here. Yes, the Okay, so this is the historical trend, and this is the OECD outlook. Lot of figures here. Concentrate on wheat and coarse grain. These two, for instance. So what is this outlook? Because these are the numbers, the figures we plug into the model to see what happens with Swedish agriculture. And actually, in this OECD outlook from 2011 to 2020, prices will continue. This is nominal prices. So prices will continue to decrease in real terms, meaning that in their world projection, productivity is continuing to grow faster than demand. But they point out that this is, of course, very sensitive to a different assumption. A 5% increase in yield means a 25% decrease in prices. So that's about the relationships effects. For meat, for beef, you can see there is a slightly increase. So that's good for farmers, but bad for consumers. And here, so basically, continuing declining real prices, but at a higher level than earlier. That's the message from the report. So this is the product prices, but then we also have to look at the input prices, and then we don't have we don't have any OECD figures for input prices in Sweden, so we have to go through the statistics. And you can only look at, there's a lot of minus here. That is the products. This is in Swedish. So you don't have to look at this very close, because that means that this means just that there are declining real prices, because this is the real prices. But here you have some positive figures, and this I don't have to translate. Phosphorus based on column, and also building and machineries. So what we have in the last 10 years is quite high increases in input prices in Sweden, and also, unfortunately, for the agriculture sector, higher than in the rest of the year. So does this mean that the agriculture sector will decrease, that production will go down in Sweden in 2020? We have falling real prices, and we also have higher increases in input prices than the rest of EU, or some parts of the EU. This will have to be met with productivity increases, and has been. So, and this is the most important part, I think. It's what will the productivity growth be for this period? Because this has real implication for profitability, farm profitability, and for resource use. Productivity means how much of input you use per output. And obviously, farmers have been able to reduce input per output, or increased output with the same input use. However, it seems as this is slowing down a bit. Look, this is winter wheat. You can see if you look at the 20-year period, it's 0.43%, half a percent, and the last 5 years, 0.23% per year, and the same for barley, 0.5, 0.34. Oilseed has actually gone up during this period, which shows that it's quite difficult to make these trends. It's a lot of variation between years. And for if you look at the yield, milk per cow, 1.63, 20-year period, 10-year period, 0.64, 5-year period, 0.44. And pigs per sow has not gone down very much during this period. So what we actually took, and roughly, I mean, we took 0.5 and 0.5 for milk and 2.25 for pig production. And this is very shaky figures, especially since they are going to be used for up to 2020 and then 2050. So what we are saying is that we know something about productivity, and it has a large impact. If you change a little in the assumption on the productivity, it will have a large impact on the sector and on environmental impact. Because this is the technological description of the agriculture sector. And when it comes to purchased other inputs, we have historically seen a reduction of 1.17% or increased in productivity in average. Fertilizer lower, and for fossil fuel diesel higher, a huge reduction in diesel. So here we are, when there is an increase in yield, we increase the fertilizer as much as the yield, and then reduce this with the average efficiency in the sector. This is an assumption as good as any other. So now we have prices, product prices, we have input prices, we have productivity. This is what will meet the Swedish sector till 2020, and we will put it into the model. But the problem, and what really happened was with this, I'll come back to that. This is a very sensitive model, so if we make a small change here, and it probably happen in real world too, it's not only in the model. If we have a low productivity, I mean that means that profitability will go down and production will decrease, especially if we put out the trends in have a long horizon. So we thought that you can't really base all your projection on just these figures, mixing them with it. So we have a change in prices, we have a change in productivity, and if there's a slight difference, and you put this in the long term, we will have a very large reaction. So we wanted to set the model to some sort of relative competitiveness to other countries. This is the increased global consumption to 2020, about 20%, different for different products. So the question is, what would happen to Swedish production? Could we keep the same market share as today? Which would actually mean a 20% increase about production if we keep the same market share in the global market share, or should we follow a trend, a historic trend, which means slightly decreasing, or a little bit decreasing production? Or could we assume that we should have the same production level? And as a base scenario, we set the production level at the same as the 2008 to 2010, because we thought this is probably not realistic if you look at where growth is taking place in the world, in South America, and it's not really consistent with the OECD outlook. And assuming a decreasing production, we had a lot of reforms with decoupling production and so on that were disturbing the pattern. So maybe it's I don't know. We did all these scenarios. So, but now I'm looking at this base. We're calling this a base level. So what will happen now when we plug this into the model? This is the base, 2020, and this is the 2050 base. Yeah, first let me say that then what we did to keep the production level at the same level as 28 to 2020 was to calibrate the productivity levels. So we said, okay, if agriculture sector should have the same production level, it needs this productivity. And actually, we didn't have to do very much with this productivity growth. So actually, having the historic growth would more or less keep the production, not for all products. And here you can see what happens. This is set aside that increases a lot because of efficient use. I mean, this is really what we are saying. What is happening is that higher productivity is increasing, mean reducing inputs, and typically land and animals. So with the same production level, you can produce with less land and also less of input uses. So yeah, but so this is an effect of keeping the production and assuming productivity levels that would keep production at the same level as before. So what you could say here is that business as usual is good for environment. I guess we haven't calculated the impact on environment, leaching and so on yet, but we are planning to do that. So what will happen if we assumed, I mean, this is the effect of higher productivity. We use less input, less land, less animal. What would happen if we change the productivity level? Say, I mean, this is very shaky figures. Could as well be less, not so high productivity levels. Maybe what is really saying that farmers should continue with making things more efficient. So what would happen if we change the figures, which we actually did? Would more land go into production? Would more animals be used? No, actually, less would be used because it would affect profitability of the farm sector. So if we change productivity for the Swedish farm sector, it will mean even less production. What we did was to, yeah, and this here we have we did a sensitivity analysis with high production, 2050, and of course more land went into cereals, oilseeds, but not just because higher yield, but rather due to higher profitability. So a small change, 10% per year. So that's a very small change. And you can see that would mean in that type, this is production of cereal, milk, and beef. And here we have kept in those two first scenarios, we kept the production level at the historical levels, and here we would have a 50-60% increase, which would probably mean that we would follow more or less follow be more closely to the global increase in global markets. And this is the use of fertilizer. So this is the base. I put that to 100 for nitrogen and phosphorus. This is the purchased inputs. And this is a bit lower than today, this base scenario, because I haven't calculated that yet. But also here we have had a more efficient use of resources. And this is the 250 base, which we have a more or less 30-40% decrease. And even in this case here, where we have a 50-60% increase in production, we would have a decrease in the use of fertilizers. So I think we will come back to look at what the environmental impact would be of this, and also look at the different scenarios. So, are we overestimating productivity? This is the trend, as I told you, at what we call the trend, 0.5% in yields, and 225. This is the calibration of the productivity rates we had to do to see how to make the sector produce, to make the model set the production at the same level as 2008 to 2010. And you can see we had to raise these figures a bit. And that's because you remember the prices for cereals were leveled out and were decreasing in real terms. So that would mean that we would have a slightly higher increase in yields. And this is because this is a bit higher than what the OECD projects for the EU as a whole. So maybe that's too high productivity. We don't know really. If this would not occur, that would mean a decrease in production. But on the other hand, you have, of course, in many regions you have high land values, so it's a bit stable for some of these changes. And of course, up to 2050, we need to increase productivity even more in the agriculture sector if we should keep up production, because if we just prolong this OECD outlook, it will mean continuing decrease in real prices. But then again, if this real prices would continue to decrease, it means that we have a high productivity rate in the rest of the world, meaning that there must be some innovation or some new technology or something that would be available also for the Swedish farmers probably. So it's either the productivity is too high, or the prices might be too low. So is this unrealistic? I don't know. What will happen until 2050? I mean, we know that productivity will continue to grow. The question is perhaps in what direction? What kind of inputs will be reduced? Maybe yields won't go up this way, but the relation between inputs and outputs will be reduced. Remember the high prices on phosphorus. That will of course mean that innovation and technology will be directed where you can save most money. So depending on what question you want to look at, it's important to see what kind of partial productivity growth is interesting. And moreover, if you look at the change in agriculture production due to climate change, this is for 2080. And you can see that in this part, this is Klein 2007. We have an increase from 15 to 35%, which is a small increase in yield compared